Welcome to today's explainer. Look, if you follow the beautiful game at all, you already know the unique rhythm, the unmatched passion, and the literally game-changing talent that African football brings to the pitch. But today, we're diving into the Confederation of African Football, or CAF. Think of it as the administrative engine that actually coordinates all that magic behind the scenes. And to really understand CAF, we gotta start with a massive number, 54. That is 54 distinct national member associations currently united under their umbrella. I mean, just pause and think about the logistical headache of that for a second. Coordinating the rules, scheduling tournaments, standardizing youth development across a landmass this impossibly vast and diverse. It's no small feat. Managing the sport for 54 distinct nations, each with its own intense footballing culture, takes some serious organization. So how did this massive operation actually come together? Well, Africa was formally recognized as a football confederation by FIFA back in 1954 at a congress over in Switzerland. But CAF itself, that was officially born right on the continent in 1957, in Khartoum, Sudan. And from those early meetings, it has evolved into this modern behemoth, currently led by President Patrice Motsepe of South Africa, who actually ran unopposed back in 2021. Which brings us to our first main section, Uniting 54 Nations and the 5 pillars of African football. Okay, so the ultimate solution to managing that massive, sprawling continent, you divide the administration into 5 regional federations to cover literally every single corner. You've got UNF up in North Africa, WAFU in the west, UNIFAC managing Central Africa, SICAFA handling the east, and COSAFA covering the south. By breaking the whole thing down into these distinct geographic zones, CAF ensures that local development and regional tournaments are tailored and, actually manageable before any teams even hit the main continental stage. It's like a giant puzzle perfectly pieced together. Moving right along to Section 2, the crown jewels, Africa's premier competitions. Now, historically, the flagship Men's Africa Cup of Nations, which we all know and love as AFCON, has been dominated by a really select few. Since the whole thing kicked off in 1957, Egypt has locked down a record 7 titles. Then you have Cameroon right on their heels with 5, and Ghana sitting strong with 4. These nations haven't just won trophies, they've built absolute dynasties on the continental stage. They've really set the gold standard for what international success looks like over there. But honestly, if you want to talk about a true, undeniable monopoly, we have to talk about the number 10. That is how many Women's Africa Cup of Nations titles the Nigerian national team has won. 10. Since the women's competition launched in 1991, the Nigerian squad has completely rewritten the rulebook on what dominance looks like in international football. Hoisting that trophy time and time again, they are without a doubt the undisputed queens of the continent. And naturally, these flagship tournaments generate incredible global interest, right? Which brings in massive commercial backing. Case in point, back in 2016, the French energy giant Total Energies stepped in as the main sponsor with an astonishing 8-year package valued at 950 million euros, nearly €1 billion. This massive injection of capital is absolute proof that African football isn't just a cultural powerhouse, it's a massive commercial engine as well. Let's shift gears to Section 3. Kings of the clubs, the domestic titans. When you drill down to the club level, the balance of power is heavily, and I mean heavily, skewed toward North Africa. In CAF club competitions like the Champions League and the Confederation Cup, Egyptian clubs alone are hoarding an unbelievable 47 continental titles. Morocco and Tunisia follow that up with 25 and 24 titles respectively. The top clubs in the north are basically out-muscling the rest of the continent when it comes to club hardware. And zooming in on those top clubs specifically, Egypt's Al Ahly sits on a throne entirely of its own, with 26 total trophies. I mean, to put that into perspective, their trophy cabinet makes them one of the most successful football clubs anywhere on the planet. They completely dwarf even their incredibly fierce local Cairo rivals, Zamalek, who have 15. Now, DR Congo's TP Mazembe does break up that North African monopoly a bit with 11 trophies of their own, but Al Ahly, they aren't just an African giant, they are a legitimate global titan. Of course, we also have to recognize the individual legends who actually drove these clubs and national teams to glory. Back when voting was held for the CAF Best Player of the Century, it was Liberia's legendary George Weah who managed to edge out the absolutely iconic Cameroonian forward Roger Milla. Weah, who, by the way, famously went on to become the actual president of Liberia, which is just wild, secured 95 points to Milla's 77. These are guys who didn't just win games, they literally captured the imagination of the entire world and put African football firmly on the map. Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, Taking on the World, Africa's global impact. You can actually trace the accelerating breakthroughs of African teams at the Men's World Cup, and it's a thrilling ride. It started way back in 1934 when Egypt became the very first African team to qualify. Skip ahead to 1986, and Morocco becomes the first to reach the knockouts. 4 years later, in 1990, Cameroon pushed all the way into the quarterfinals. And as we all remember, the steady progression completely exploded in 2022 with Morocco's historic, magical run to the semifinals. They proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that African teams can absolutely go toe-to-toe with football's traditional superpowers. And you have to add to that World Cup progress the spectacular back-to-back men's Olympic gold medals from Nigeria in 1996 and Cameroon in 2000. Oh, and we absolutely cannot overlook the sheer consistency of the Nigerian women's team. They've maintained an unbroken streak of World Cup appearances, participating in 9 consecutive Women's World Cups from 1991 all the way through to 2023. The impact of CAF nations on the global stage, it's a deeply rooted legacy of just constantly breaking barriers and setting new standards of excellence. So why does all of this history, all this structure, and all this organization matter so much right now? Well, because African football is about to get an unprecedented, hugely expanded platform on the world stage. Starting with the 2026 FIFA World Cup, CAF will be allocated 9 direct spots. That is a massive jump up from their historic averages. Plus, there's a potential 10th spot available via an intercontinental playoff. That's a literal game changer for representation. And with this massive expansion of opportunity, it really leaves us with one thrilling question to consider about the future of the beautiful game. With up to 10 teams headed to the 2026 World Cup, armed with world-class talent and robust organizational backing, is the ultimate global prize finally coming to African soil? Honestly, it's a tantalizing prospect, and it makes the Confederation of African Football one of the most exciting organizations to watch in world sports today. Definitely keep your eyes on the pitch for this one.